A few years ago, I went down to my daughter's new flat in Birmingham. We helped her move in. And I went down to the shop to buy some lunch and had a rather bad experience. I didn't get any lunch. Let's see. So the writer here had an almost identical experience to me. I've never met this person, don't know her from Adam, but I read her book recently. I was in the local shop today, getting something to eat for lunch, when I suddenly had the strangest sensation. A spontaneous awareness of the unlikeliness of this life. I thought of all the rest of the human population, most of whom live in what you and I would call abject poverty, who've never entered or seen such a shop. And this is what all their work sustains. This lifestyle for people like us. All the various brands of soft drinks in plastic bottles, and all the pre-packaged lunch deals, and confectionery in sealed bags, and store-baked pastries. This is it, the culmination of all the labour in the world, all the burning of the fossil fuels, and all the back-breaking work on coffee farms and sugar plantations. All for this, the convenience shop. I felt dizzy just thinking about it. It was as if I suddenly remembered that my life was all part of a television show, and every day people died making the show, were ground to death in the most horrific ways, children, women, and all, so I could choose from various lunch options, each packaged in multiple layers of single-use plastic. I thought I'd throw up. Of course, a feeling like that can't last. Maybe for the rest of the day. Or even for the rest of the week. So what? I still have to buy lunch. And in case you're worrying about me, let me assure you that buy lunch I did. Except that was the author, and I didn't. And so the person who wrote that, let's look, where's the clicker? Oops. Ah, yeah, it's coming on. Yeah, so it's... Okay, thanks. Am I mic'd up? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So the person who wrote that is obviously Sally Rooney, the author. The character who wrote it had mental health issues of quite a serious nature relating to all sorts of things, but possibly food as well. And that is exactly what happened to me. I went to this shop. I felt there's absolutely nothing here I can eat. Nowadays, I have that sort of sensation when I go in a shop like that of nobody ever talks about, you know, the carbon footprint of fizzy drinks and sweets and chocolates and rubbish food that doesn't sustain you and doesn't have any nutrients in it worth talking about apart from sugar. But they should. You know, cows get demonized. Why not Mars bars? So this is my dream convenience shop. It would just have real food in it. And it wouldn't be expensive. Maybe it would be some sort of cooperative thing so people could work in it and get cheaper food. And the emphasis would be on whole foods and local foods. And I was telling someone that I recently got half a lamb from a local organic farmer who only does 6 sheep. And that felt quite good that I'd bought this, you know, local meat. Very short journey to my home, put it in the freezer from a small organic farm. But, you know, most people don't have access to that. So having shops where, I mean, I sort of feel that going into a convenience shop and saying, I'm so sorry, I cannot buy anything here. You know, we need to vote with our feet and just say, it'll just make me feel ill. And, you know, when you go to the filling station, they say, do you want, you know, when you're buying your petrol, they say, do you want to buy a chocolate bar? And there's a big 500-gram bar of chocolate. And I'm like, but no, You know, we need to say no and say, I think it's wrong. You know, what about sugar addicts? Why are you offering them an extra bar of chocolate? I mean, I felt really angry. I went into Morrison's and the whole lobby was full of chocolate and biscuits. And I was thinking, do I go and complain to the manager, or do I write a letter to, you know, do I write to head office? You know, what do I do to the local Food Standards Agency and say, don't they know there's an obesity crisis going on? You know, this is ridiculous. So I have seen convenience shops like this. My son lived in Denmark for 2 years, and there were shops there called, I think, 7-Eleven, and they did actually sell real foods in packets. You know, they would sell fish and meat and salads and all sorts in packages, so there was still packaging, but it was actually real food. This is how I talk to people about food, and I start where they are. So some people have a terrible diet. I had a lady who just drank tea with sugar because she said she was fat and she didn't want to eat food. So starting from that, I'd say, well, what sort of foods would you eat? You know, would you like to introduce? Because I think that you're making yourself ill with eating so little. But I had a debate on Twitter, a very private debate. I hate these public spats on Twitter. So a dietitian who will remain nameless got somehow involved with me in Twitter, so I sent him a private message. And I thought it was quite interesting, really. So I was saying, you know, why don't people just eat real food? So he wrote, what is real food? All food is real. Okay, boom, boom. So it's not I'm not talking about imaginary versus real. This is precisely the issue with nutrition, in that the language used is pseudo-scientific. I don't regard the word real as scientific. I regard the word real as a commonly used term for something that's not fake. So the next bit was, Ray the Eat Well plate. Are you suggesting that the reasons we have such high rates of obesity and type 2 diabetes are due to following of the guidelines? Yes, sort of, partly, because the guidelines determine in this country the food given to people in nursing homes, the food that people choose to eat. Like, people will choose to buy Benecol because they've heard on the television that it reduces their cholesterol, and they know that the guidelines say you should have a low cholesterol. So I do think that's a big part of it, the Eat Well plate. He's got a point, though. He says, I would suggest that if more of the population ate more fruit and vegetables, less refined carbohydrates, and better sources of protein, then we'd be better off. Sort of true for my lady on tea with sugar. And possibly true for a gentleman who I knew who just ate pigeon. And I think the point he misses is that for a lot of us, carbohydrates are exceptionally addictive. Next bit. The challenge when one continues to peddle anti-establishment advice is that it becomes impossible to acknowledge those studies which support the counterposition. So I think we need to guard against this. You know, I think we do need to look at studies that actually challenge us and say otherwise. But I've yet to find anybody who has said that it would be a problem if people just ate food which was natural, food that used to run about or walk or swim or grow in the soil or come from an animal. I mean, I used to say to dietitians and other people who challenged me, would you say it's a problem if somebody said they only ate food which was fresh, that they cooked themselves, that they didn't add any, sugar to it, they just put in a bit of salt? Would you say that was a problem and they were going to get ill if they just ate meat, fish, vegetables, dairy? They'd say, well, of course not, but nobody would ever say that. But it's just real. Somebody said earlier that food contains nutrients that you need to eat. So the lady who just drank tea with sugar had virtually no nutrients if it was black tea. The man who just ate pigeon, I have a feeling pigeon's quite a low-fat meat, so he'd probably be deficient in fat-soluble vitamins and many minerals eventually. But just recognizing, so this is what I do with my patients, and I must say that I'm not a practicing doctor, prescribing doctor. Now I was a doctor for since 1986, so 36 years I've been a doctor. I'm still a doctor, but I'm not a prescribing doctor. And I still run groups, and I still explain to people what real food is. And this is how I do it, because my dietitian colleague didn't think it was a very useful term and felt it was unscientific. But my patients don't seem to have a problem with it. I say real food is real as in the opposite of false, pretend, fake. So a donut is fake, a chicken is real. If they're vegetarian or vegan, I don't challenge that, apart from very gently if they're not doing well. But obviously kidney beans are real, and a burger, you know, this sort of bean burger, whatever, you know, the Beyond Meat burger, that's clearly fake. Real food is not likely to be in particularly bright packaging, although you can have you know, like say you could get sardines which were just with a bit of olive oil, and it might be in a bright tin, and that would be a minimally processed food. And either a no ingredients list, as in broccoli, kale, salmon, chicken, beef, or just with real ingredients. So say you just had, you know, like say the example would be the sardines and olive oil. Albeit there could be problems with olive oil. You've got to watch your food quality as well, as somebody told me. So minimally processed is the Nova 3. The Nova system is a bit better, but I find my patients just don't want to go into that. I mean, Zoe Harkin very kindly made me some cards a few years ago, which just had pictures of real food. So just going back, you know, is that right? Yeah. So I just show people pictures of real food and say, you know, are these things that you would eat, or what do you like to eat? What would you be willing to give a go? I like David Unwin's idea that, you know, what change are you prepared to make? You know, my lady with the, say there was another person who just lived on McDonald's food, who worked for McDonald's, so she got free or subsidized food, and she had a terrible rash. And I was saying, well, you need nutrients. You need more nutrients than the food you're having at the moment. Will give to you. So what are you willing to eat, you know? And she said, oh, I would be, you know, I'd be happy to eat chicken. I'd be happy to boil a few eggs, that sort of thing. And simple food, you know, a lot of people don't cook. Another person said to me today, quite rightly so, that, you know, a lot of their patients had never learned to cook. So some of our groups are running very simple cooking sessions, how to boil an egg, how to make an omelette, how to cook a chicken, things like that. And obviously you don't have to cook things. I've had people do my course who have just, you know, simply put a chicken in the oven and eaten it, or boiled some eggs. You know, they haven't actually done anything in particular. They've just made sure the food is heated up and to a sufficient amount. Yeah, the other things about real food are they're rarely advertised. You know, and I actually did see cabbages advertised on the back of a lorry yesterday when I was driving up, and I thought, okay, they wouldn't put meat on there, would they? It's like, why not? You know, it's a much more nutritious food than cabbage. Although the 5-year-old me would have thought cabbages are much more nutritious. Yeah, anything else here? Yeah, so a lot of false foods in brightly coloured packaging. And it struck me recently because I've recently in lockdown, I had 2 grandchildren, and my daughter has taken to buying something called Ella's Kitchen. And Ella's Kitchen, it claims to be very high quality organic food for babies, and it's in very, very bright packaging. And the one that's made its way to my fridge was just prunes. That's all it was. And obviously you could have bought cheaper prunes just from Morrison's or wherever. But I looked into the history of Ella's Kitchen. Ella never had a kitchen. It's not the same Ella who was vegan. It's, I think, the man's daughter was called Ella. And he got a contract with Sainsbury's before a single carton of food had ever been manufactured. I think that's quite amazing. And he used to work for Nickelodeon. And he knew that children like bright packages. And I don't know when addiction really begins, because I'd say my granddaughter of 2 is a wee bit addicted already, and she's addicted to the bright packaging. And she loves going around Asda. So one of my hints and tips about keeping your children safe is probably not to take them shopping to probably take them to the market, really, rather if you are going to take them shopping. And actually, go around the real food places. So it's interesting, because it's not scientific, the phrase real food, the evidence for real food is lacking, but the evidence against ultra-processed food, like Nova 4 group, is there. There's quite a bit. And if you look, within a few minutes, you'll find rebuttals by the processed food companies about ultra-processed foods. It doesn't take long for them to say, oh, there's no evidence. And they managed to get their studies published too. Yeah. So going back to the Eat Well guide, I think my dietitian colleague on Twitter had a point that there is lots of real food in the Eat Well guide, and for some people it does represent an improvement in their diet. And I just focus on the real foods there. And I do like Zoe Harcum's group of 9. I do think that's a very good way to divide them up, because fruit is not the same as vegetables, and meat is not the same as fish, and protein's not a food. It's a macronutrient. And all I would say is dairy without added ingredients. My Twitter colleague said that he had commented on he and his colleagues had commented on the Eat Well guide, and they'd said, it's a problem if you put things like pineapple on pizza, and you shouldn't do that. Well, I'd say it's a problem if you don't have ordinary dairy, if you don't consider ordinary dairy and you allow fruit yogurts, for instance, to be dairy. I think that's an issue even for children. It just develops too much of a sweet tooth. But anyway, this is what I do. And most of my patients have got a reason. They don't come along with no reason. The reasons are either they want to lose weight, they want to help their autoimmune disease, they want to get rid of diabetes, or they want to prevent becoming diabetic. Those are the common ones. So those are all real foods, but a lot of people have problems with certain real foods, and it's got to be individualized. And that's my big beef with the dietary guidance, with the Eat Well guide, because it's supposed to apply to everybody from the age of 2 up to 80. And come on, you know, a 2-year-old versus, I don't know, a bodybuilder who's 25. You know, it's ridiculous that, you know, that they're even considered together. But in our space, we're considering diabetic people and non-diabetic people, people with food allergy, people with food allergy versus people who don't have any allergies, people with autoimmune disease versus people with none, people with addictions, of whom there are an awful lot. And over the last 2 days, I've heard one person say it could be 100% of people who have food issues, let's say, and looking at people, dividing people into groups where they are a very low body BMI, ordinary normal BMI, high BMI, and super high BMI. The range of food addiction in certain studies ranges from about 20% in some groups to over 60% in others. And the worst group are super skinny people and super overweight people, which is very interesting. So I think that you have to look at real food and be nuanced about it. Obviously, at the moment, it seems to me there are an awful lot of people who've got ethical concerns about food. I'll go into that in a minute. So I think I've been doing a low-carb diet now since 2014, and I've been teaching it from shortly after that. And I would say it's either a low-carb diet for the diabetic people or a real food diet if it's, say, children. And I have worked with some children whose parents wanted help with them. And I've concentrated with the children on real food. And some people have commented about what do we do about children. And I would say with children, just avoiding ultra-processed food and drink would be a really good start. And I have found as a low carber that eventually I wouldn't call it carb creep. I'd call it ultra-processed food creep, really, and ultra-processed drink creep. And what happens is it's a hot day and somebody offers you a Diet Coke. Do you take it or not? My general thing is no. It's a chemical thing and I don't drink that sort of thing. But occasionally, if I was very thirsty and there was nothing else and somehow I wasn't near a tap, I might be tempted. And so that might have, I mean, it probably doesn't happen. I'll often look at it. And that thing that somebody said yesterday about you're debating whether to have it or not. Shall I have it? Shall I not? Shall I have it? Shall I not? So that happened at the weekend and I was looking at it. I thought not. That's fine. And I didn't have birthday cake at the weekend either, which is good. So the creep things that have happened with me are condiments, and they've usually got seed oils, and they've usually got about 10 ingredients. So things like horseradish or mayonnaise, that sort of thing. The other thing is, like when I go to my book group and people offer me a slice of cake, and then they know I don't eat gluten, so then the next time they'll offer me gluten-free cake, which is really kind. And I'm thinking, you're missing the point here. Yeah, and sometimes I'll have it. But it won't become a habit because I don't keep it at home. But you do get a lot of peer pressure. People who say, oh, you're really boring, or I couldn't do your diet, or oh, God, she's really boring, her, or whatever. And they try to make out that you don't enjoy life the way that they do. And I think they're just wrong. I love my life, really. And I think we've just got to laugh it off. I mean, we can't be po-faced about it. They haven't seen the light yet. And I saw the light by accident. It wasn't like I was trying very hard. I think avoid healthy labels, avoid eco-friendly labels, and avoid plant-based, veggie and vegan-friendly labels. They are your friendly, ultra-processed food drug pusher. That's what they are. And the same goes for keto snacks. I mean, I run a WhatsApp group and I have a Zoom group. And in the WhatsApp group, I find time and again, people come up with something, some product they found online and they buy, and they photograph the back of the label and put it on our WhatsApp group and say either, is this okay, or this was very tasty. And yeah, and I think snacks. And another grandma in the audience pointed out that young people today seem to give their children a lot of snacks, and nurseries seem to give children snacks as if they can't possibly last till the next meal. And I think snacks are really the enemy of good health. I don't think you need them. At first, I used to tell people what sort of things to have for snacks. Like, you know, if they asked, I'd say, well, hard-boiled eggs and chicken legs and maybe hummus and carrot sticks or something, you know, like real-ish food. But actually, increasingly, I think, don't have snacks. And I think in our community, I'm right to say that everybody started off on maybe 3 meals a day and then went to 2, and then a lot of people go to 1, and a lot of them practice fasting from time to time as well. So this is a little bit about minimally processed. So have you ever noticed that when you walk down the road, there are packets on the ground and bottles, and none of them used to contain salmon or broccoli or fish? And I did notice they went down a lot during lockdown. And these are a couple that I found. And you can see that the pork scratchings, these pork scratchings, you can probably see there, but basically they've just got pork rind, salt and yeast extract. But some pork scratchings have got a lot of ingredients. And then you can see on the right, you can see all the wonderful credentials. I did want to try and block out the name of the packet, but you know, it's got no, you can be reassured it's got no artificial colours, and it's 30% less fat. So that's clearly really something to go for. But yes, and so I did find another packet of these that just had potatoes, oil, but it had a list of all sorts of oils, and then it had a list of allergens like celery and nuts, I think, and various things that weren't actually in the ingredients list, which is very strange. But this one actually contains lots of rubbish and lots of ingredients. And certainly if you cut your food down to products that contain 3 or less ingredients, it would fail on that front. But the middle one is our biggest enemy when we're teaching people about eating real food, and particularly if they latch on to going onto a ketogenic diet. Because this is a product that people often put into smoothies. You know, they've got this idea they should have a high-fat smoothie and they should mix it in. And it's coconut oil powder, it's got some milk, it's got fat-reduced cocoa powder, it's got medium-chain triglyceride powder, it's got avocado oil powder, it's got flavouring brackets milk, it's got stabilisers of xanthan gum and carboxyl methyl cellulose. Well, let them off with the salt. It's got 2 sorts of sweeteners, sucralose and acesulfame K, and then it's got some vitamins, just to make you feel better. It may contain gluten, egg, peanuts, soya, and other nuts. I mean, this is actually what I find I'm up against. So I try and get the real food message. People, especially if they concentrate just on losing weight rather than getting well, I think this is a problem when they just concentrate on losing weight and not for a better reason, like I want to be able to dance again, I want to be able to bend down and pick up my grandchildren. But where they particularly have got weight issues, I find that they often try and add in these keto products. And maybe they think they'll get quicker results, but I don't find that they do. Okay, so these are real food tips that I give to my patients. You know, make a real breakfast and real snacks. Join a group of like-minded people. And particularly for kids, choose real food from the adult menu. Just give away the kids' menu. And kids' menus are dreadful. They're much worse than adult menus. Just get a half portion or feed them off your plate. And say no to free. It's very rare. In supermarkets here, they often give free fruit. I think that's not a good idea to walk around eating fruit as a sort of, while you're walking around a supermarket with a child. It slows them down, it makes them look at stuff, you know, they can pester you. But the biggest free thing is like free ice cream with a meal, or a free toy with a meal. I think those are stopping, aren't they? Buy unadvertised food. Shop for real in markets and real food shops with kids. You know, like go to the butcher's if you have one. We don't have a fruit and veg shop in our village, So, but if you do, go to one. Eat with friends or family and feed them real food. You know, you don't need to make excuses and say, oh, this is from my low carb cookbook. Just make it. It's food. Put it on the table. See if they like it. And ask for simpler, you know all this. I mean, I feel I'm preaching to the converted here, but this is just what I tell my patients. And don't eat and walk. I mean, all the packaging, if you care about the environment, don't eat and walk, because you might drop that packet. And this is when real food's a problem. So Ian and I have had several discussions, Ian Lake, one of the other trustees, about are we a real food organisation or a low carb organisation? And I say we've got to be lots of things really, because some groups need real food, some need low carb food, but sometimes real food is an issue, or certain real foods are an issue, and I've just listed them here. I mean, I think plenty of people do a low carb or real food diet, but snack all the time. I think that's very counterproductive. And if you're eating a food that makes you snack a lot, not a good idea. Poverty is a real problem. It can be a problem with real food, just because, you know, how can they afford it, and where are they going to shop? And if I go back to the Birmingham story, you know, there wouldn't have been any real food in that shop, so they would have needed to get a bus somewhere to actually get some food. Or if they had a job, they would need to go on the way back from work. But it's just thinking about these things with our patients. We can't assume. David talks about, you know, talking to the person who does, and saying who does the shopping, who does the cooking. Well, where do you shop? And do you think would there be any reasons you couldn't actually eat this sort of food, or what sort of food you like? Can you know, is money an issue for you at the moment? If you might know that they'd lost the job or whatever. But there are all sorts of reasons. I think food addiction is a really massive problem, and it's a big reason for relapse. And food allergy, I mean, say dairy is a really big one. A lot of people think they've got a problem with dairy and don't give it up, and then overeat it. You know, they may be just having cream, lots and lots of cream on their strawberries, having massive quantities of yogurt, and then they may relapse generally in terms of their eating. So just recognising, you know, if foods are ones that you will overeat or snack on too much, recognising if you've got an intolerance. Obviously diabetes, we need to do low carbohydrate or keto ways of eating. Pesticides can be an issue on vegetables, on fruits. Can you really get rid of them? Are they causing trouble with you? Same with lectins and saponins. A lot of people say about nuts and lentils, about soaking them for ages, washing the water out, then cooking them for a long time. But is that enough? Are the lectins still affecting you? So that's it. And this little bit, the right food doesn't give you a rash, it doesn't raise your blood glucose, It gradually normalizes your weight. And I say that because I get underweight people who come to my groups as well. And you're not tempted at all to snack repeatedly on it. It doesn't give you rashes, joint pains, gut issues if it's the right food for you. And I'm talking about the right food for you because it's different for different people. And I would say that right food can be affordable and nutrient dense. I once had very little money. I just had £5. And I was riding my bicycle down the road and I crashed into somebody's wing mirror and took it off. At which point the man got out of the car and wanted payment on the spot. And that was my money for the week gone. And I rang my mother and I said, can't believe what's happened, I've got no money. And she said, cabbages are cheap. It's like, I have to borrow money for a cabbage. But it would be much better to eat sardines or a little piece of liver or something. And if somebody's very overweight, it's actually quite a good strategy to not try to eat 2 meals a day. You know, if they can't afford that, but also they're not hungry in the morning, we'll suggest they can skip breakfast, give them that permission. But I know it's difficult when people haven't got money and they may need to go food banks. And I would say to all of you, to food banks, donate the nutrient-dense food to food banks, you know, rather than the pasta, or donate toiletries. You know, don't try not to donate pot noodle, that sort of thing. I'm picking on pot noodle, but it could be anything. You know, foods that don't have protein, don't have good fats. You know, people who are on a low income need better food than that. Thank you. That's all. And thank you so much for staying all this time.